Hey everyone, welcome to The Mess. We're here with a long form video. I'm interrupting myself already. This guide has taken a lot of turns. I end up wiring this barricade 3 different ways. Once is rewiring it with a bit more power, the original way it worked with the on-off. The second one, I added a 2-stage trigger and then left the original on-off as kind of a backup on-off switch or kill switch. And then the third way is the original on-off switch works the way it used to, but if it's off, there's also a 2-stage trigger. So make this video full screen, take some screenshots, hopefully you'll find them handy. And weirdly enough, it's not the next one I expected to be doing. It's actually a mod guide for the 2010 Barricade, which I certainly did not expect to do. This is a blaster I have a few of, and I didn't have a lot of interest in it because you have to turn it on to activate the flywheels, kind of like the D-Dart Tempest, and the performance is really bad. The reason the performance is bad is the Barricade was meant for these Whistler darts with these wider tips as opposed to elite darts. So the cage spacing is just way too wide, so these elite darts barely go out of it. And I don't have enough Whistler dart. I have some Whistler darts, but I don't have enough to go out and play in the backyard against somebody with Whistler darts. Side note to that, that's where the Stockade does come in. This is the version of the Barricade with that tighter cage and meant for elite darts. You might say, why didn't you just mod the Stockade? Well, one, I didn't want to. I think it's fun to mod whatever you want. And 2, I found a gear up version of the Barricade. So this wasn't in perfect shape, had a little bit of marker on it, so I decided I'm going to mod this. I did this one in my 9-volt style that I've been enjoying lately, actually 9-volt and a little bit lower. And I specifically wanted this to be a sleeper. I didn't want to do anything to cut away from the shell. I'm a little all over the place here, but I should also mention another thing about the Barricade that made me not super interested is it only ran on 3 AA batteries. So it is extremely low voltage. So even though I thought this looked cool, these just kind of went in my bins for spare parts. But now I will say this is maybe one of my favorite flywheel sidearms. This is now really cool. Stock versus modded. On 9-volt, it fires elite darts at around 90 FPS. I did keep original switches. I actually moved some switches around. The switch that used to turn on the flywheels now turns on the blaster, and pulling the trigger part way activates the flywheels. I took the switch from the jam door and actually added it underneath here in the trigger. I was going to add some 3D printed parts from 01 Tech, check him out on Instagram, to give this a traditional rev trigger, but I really, on the gear up one, did not want to cut the shell. So I decided to go 2-stage trigger. There's such a long trigger pull here that actually works really well. It's pretty cool. You have to be kind of familiar with it. You really have to give it a little bit of rev time. I actually like this project so much, I'm probably going to go back and actually do a version of this with upgraded motors and flywheels. This is using stock motors, stock flywheels. I am using a new cage from my friend Foam.Blasted to move those motors together as opposed to the original cage. I also could have pulled out the cage from the Stockade, but I have a 3D printer. If you don't have a 3D printer and you find one of these thrifted, that's a good option, or you could just do the mod to the Stockade. That's kind of a quick overview because I spent a lot of time on the guide because I was kind of fumbling through it. I'd never done it before, but I'll put in lots of chapter markers. Hopefully it'll help you. I'm also going to mention where I use a few stock switches here and there. I'll kind of show you at the end of the video. If you skip ahead, I have a few other types of switches, better switches if you want to do more high power. I have a 3D printed battery extender from 01 Tech, and I'll show you that and show you where to get the files from that if you want to use this with a big LIPO. This blaster could be really good. I'll actually share a picture of 01 Tech's Tactical Barricade. That looks awesome, and that's what I'm going to do to this one, actually. As much as I've been enjoying the 9-volt stuff, I'm going to go all in on one of these ones, get myself some Krakens, some Daybreaks, and I'm going to go to town on this thing. I'll have to do a bit of shell cutting for the motors and like I don't mind doing that to a yellow version. I didn't want to do it to the Gear Up one. I wanted this one to kind of look like a sleeper and live in a world where Nerf in 2010 or 2011, when the Gear Up came out, was making blasters at dart zone speeds. This encapsulates what I love about the hobby, to be honest. It's so cool when a blaster takes you down a path you did not expect to go on. So if you find one of these thrifted, I definitely suggest this mod guide. At the end of the video, I'll show you that 2-stage trigger bit. That was an add-on I did after, so it's a little bit more condensed. I'll show you how you would add a better switch instead of the stock switch that I did if you want to. I didn't. You know what? I'm just being kind of thrifty lately. I spend a lot on Nerf. I'm kind of enjoying these mod projects that are cobbling together what I have. I find that's, not only is it cheaper, I find it's really satisfying, especially since most of the time I'm doing this for learning and for fun and not battling a lot with these, but I kind of want to do a battle version of this one. This one is now a favorite. I'm just talking about the same thing over and over again. I just had so much fun doing this. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you get something out of it. Leave something in the comments if you have a question about how to hook anything up. I will say, if you use a better switch for this, or you want to do this with LIPO, because of the room inside, you're probably not going to have this be able to actually be an on-off switch. It's really tight in there, but you could still leave all this in and have it function as a safety lock, which is not, you know, that's not a bad idea either to do. It'll be pretty hard to actually have this cut off the current. That stock switch is tiny, tiny, tiny. So you can use this little cherry switch if you want to do a 2-stage thing like I did, or you could use something like this Omron switch if you want to actually hook this up to a rev trigger like this. I'm using 9-volt and 7.5-volt. I'm using some different types of rechargeable packs. I've been experimenting with a lot of different stuff. If you needed to, if you're being real budget, I don't know, you could like tape this on top of your blaster if you just want to use batteries. There's always a way. Who cares how it looks? Well, I cared how the Gear Up one looked, but generally if you're doing something, just cobble together a monster. That's fun. Enjoy the guide. This was probably my most manic video intro ever, but I actually have to go photograph something for work in a little bit, and I wanted to get this first part done so I could put it in front of the guide, so I could put in my timestamps and start putting in my chapter markers. So, all right, take care. This is also my goodbye at the end of the video. There will not be more me. It'll just probably sign off. So, bye. All right, let's get into it and open up this barricade. I think that's all the screws. Let's open it up. Oh, there is a screw in the battery tray underneath the batteries. An easy one to miss. I want to see what happens if we go from our 3 batteries that this took. 4.5-volt is super low. I guess we will take a few more things out here, and I will do this carefully so that I remember what I'm doing. I'll kind of document it here, I guess. So first, there's a long screw out of that piece for our pusher. I'll take out our trigger. Wow. Always want to be careful taking out a lot of these screws because we are just screwing in and out of plastic, and I want to be really cautious about that. So even though it might be a pain in the butt, I might leave this in here just so I'm not screwing that in and out. Cylinder comes out pretty easy. This orange piece came off there. We're just going to put that cylinder aside. Oh yeah, our sliding door here. There's a lock in here we might remove. If we are going to rewire, I guess I will need to take this cover off. There is a very tiny screw. I have a much better screwdriver for this, but it's not here. Oh, there's another tiny screw. Whoops. This is all connected here. So we'll take this out, this internal screw out. All those internal screws are all the same size, it seems. Okay. Pain in the butt. Wire channel here. Wow, there is not very much crush in those flywheels. Oh my goodness. I guess though that crush was kind of meant to allow for these Whistler darts as well. I guess maybe that's more fair than I was originally going to say. What a weird little cap that clicks on here to keep these things in this wire channel. That's interesting. We are going to snip that at first. We're gonna snip our positive and negative leads here first. I'm gonna pull this up out of this wire channel. I'm going to remove, those are a different size screw. I'm gonna have to watch this myself in order to know what I'm doing here. Put these screws right in this cover maybe. And then we have our little on-off switch here. Pop that out of there. These little things are weird. I'm just gonna cut these little things off. We will use a little dab of hot glue if we need to seat things in our... Let's do just a quick little test. Since we're taking this out anyway, let's see what actually happens if we go up to 6 volt here. Realistically, I'm going to be using a small LIPO, but I'm just kind of curious what kind of gains we might get from this. Just experimenting. We're going to do a very scientific thing where we tape down the rev trigger. So we got 80 FPS using a Whistler dart. I have to go in a second here, but before we do, let's just pop this cage out and, whoops, I have my camera in a weird spot. Let's just pop these off. Oh no. We'll continue to pop these off. I did a stupid thing here. I let my negative and positive wires that were exposed and bare, I let them touch on my, oh man. Yeah, I let them touch and that caused a problem. What is keeping this together? But anyway, we got that out of there. I don't know what's going on in this, making it all wonky here. Anyway, we'll get these flywheels off. We'll see if we can do anything with this cage here, and then we'll get back to it. All right, we are back. Sorry for the time jump. I needed to print a new cage. My friend Markus at Foam.Blasted had a file with a bit of higher crush, so I'm excited. I am going to snip all this stuff away. Lots of little resistors and stuff. And I need to pop these flywheels off. I do have a tool for that somewhere, but we might end up just doing it a bad way. Get yourself some nylon pries. Never pry plastic with metal. Don't do as I do, as I am going to do it this way. That at least was very easy. I'm also not too worried about doing it this way because I'm not going to use this cage. Those flywheels are not on there very well. I'm used to flywheels being a lot harder to get off. Pop, pop. So, old cage, new cage. So, what's kind of cool about this new cage is he made it for the stock motors. This is really kind of that in the middle mid-tier modding that I've been kind of enjoying. A lot of the cages you would find online would be for might be for bigger motors. I am going to have to desolder this little tiny board off of these motors so that they'll fit in my new cage. While that's heating up, I should just mention I was having trouble closing this in the video before. The reason was the barrel, the bit of barrel inside had slid. So once that barrel was back in place, it clicked right back together. I'm still not sure why I was having so much trouble getting it all the way apart. I don't want to break it, and I'm pretty sure I can get it all back together without taking it completely apart, so I might just leave it. Well, my desoldering didn't work, but my inelegant just clipping it off seemed to. So, whatever. This is why I go through so many snips. So be careful if you're doing it my awful way that you do not break the tabs. Because we need to solder onto these points here. I've just clipped away all the old wire. And that was not really the best way to do it, but these face each other in the cage. I might solder these before I put them in the cage. There you go. If I've never talked about them before, helping hands are very, very important for soldering. I desperately need a new tip for this soldering iron. I have one on order. So if you're like, what is he doing? Well, I am making do. All right, for spacing. What a mess. Seems solid though. I feel like I might actually be the worst person at soldering that you'll actually see doing it publicly. I have a hard time with it. Oops, I cut that wire. I guess I usually do this with them in the cage because it's easier, but oh boy. Another not very good soldering job in the books. This is such a good cage. Markus is so good. There we go. Much better. Let's get a big length of wire here. They're closer together. It's probably enough. All right. When I showed a picture of this, I got a lot of comments about, you know, how to make this thing just, you know, incredibly powerful and all the things I could do. And honestly, I feel like you guys have heard me say this before, but I'm just enjoying doing mods kind of on the cheap and with minimal parts, mostly some wire, some other, you know, pieces here and there. An interesting thing for this, if you're looking at this mod and you're like, I don't have, oh boy, wow. There we go. If you're looking at this and you're like, I don't have a 3D printer, a lot of people find, if you can find a thrifted Stockade, you can use the cage from the Stockade. You might say, why not just mod the Stockade? Good question. I guess why not? Only for the reason I want to mod a Barricade. I also, where it's the gear up, Barricade is not super common. I thought it would be cool to mod that one. I mean, do we really need reasons why? I don't really think we do. Sweet. That's awesome. All right, let's, that seems to have a lot of bite. That's great. This part is been the bane of my existence. I'm sure I could figure it out if I took a little more time. There we go. But whatever. It's back together. You definitely don't want to over tighten when you're screwing into 3D printed parts because you are creating the threads. Awesome. I am going to do a test. Now, when you're doing stuff like this, you cannot let your positive and negative wires touch. Put a piece of tape, of electrical tape, over them. I was doing this earlier and I was goofing around and I was being lazy. Yeah. Scared myself. I forgot that there's not a switch. That definitely was going the right way. Let's do it again. Yeah, that'll be good. It's definitely always good to do a test. Let's do some more demolition here. We don't need this. And I want to get the metal out of this. So those. One with the blob of solder is a little trickier. I'm gonna do a thing you shouldn't do. I go through so many of those. There we go. So the switch thing I couldn't remember. This little piece, this little piece goes in here, and when it's moved over, it turns on the switch. Cool. At some point, there's room. I would love to put a rev trigger in this and then keep this as an on-off switch, maybe. We'll see. We're not going to do that tonight, but we will see. This goes over top of this like that. So I remember that now. This piece has a screw hole right here. It is literally just a kill switch holder. It keeps it from firing if the door is open from squeezing the trigger. I'm just going to open this up real quick. Kind of a disjointed mod, but I've never done this before, so I haven't done the barricade ever, so, you know, just, it is what it is. Bloop. I'm going to take that little guy out. I'm going to take that little spring out. And then I'm going to put this back together. And just like that, lock, be gone. Oh. Now it doesn't have a satisfying little thunk when you open it. Yeah, jeez. Sometimes there's consequences to your actions. Well, the other thing we could do, if we wanted, is we could just grind down that little nub so we still have that springy part. Yeah, this is where, I don't know, this is where we decide how much certain things are worth doing. I think I've decided that I will just leave this. But you could absolutely glue this down, because it still grabs if it's down all the time. Or, even better, you could grind this nub down, because it's that little nub that's stopping it from releasing. I'll leave that to you whether you do it or not. All right. There we go. Sometimes memories are hard. A couple things I kind of forgot. I might put this back in because it kind of covered up a wire channel. So even though I'm not using that switch anymore, I might still put that in there. The other thing, I didn't discover where this long one was from. I don't want to put it in the wrong place. That's my best guess for that. We have our pusher stuff back together. Let's do some more wiring. That goes in there. We do have some screws that go in there. Okay. Now, these wires, I think we want them to go through there. Go. Well, they go down through underneath, which I probably should have realized. Boy, I sure do hate to unscrew this, because that did not grip in there very well. So we can use those same wire channels that we have here, which is kind of good. I'm sure you guys can see. So we ran down under there, through there, clipped in, went around this, which I think is how it was before. Now we'll put this stuff back on. There we go. Is there any chance this is the long one? Yeah, it is that one. Okay, cool. And that kind of makes sense because that's adding more strength to that as well. One thing I should have done is like made that wire channel just a little deeper. All right. Okay. Now. I love how I said you don't want to screw and unscrew these too many times, and I've done it 1,000 times now. It's easy to forget stuff. Neat. We're going to do a very simple little strife style circuit. Hey there, I'm just inserting a simple diagram on the standard Nerf switches. I just thought this might help people understand something that it took me a long time to understand. And this is how most switches work, and most switches should be marked NC, C, or NO. I'm gonna get my helping hands. I'm just gonna move this out of the way for a minute. I am going to use the stock switch because I'm only planning on doing this as a 9-volt mod. That means I am going to have to print an extended battery tray. I do have a really tiny, weird LIPO that I might try. Joel King will be very angry at me, but I won't run it all the time. I just will try it quickly to see if it's worth replacing this switch altogether. See what my gains are from that tiny, tiny LIPO. I am going to run. Oh, it's hard to figure out how much to do. I don't think I need very much. But I can always loop it around in the handle, I think. Definitely don't want to make it too short. I might put some heat shrink on this. I don't know how I thought I hit record twice. Anyway, I have wired my positive into the bottom of this switch and then out of the middle on this switch. I am using the stock switch. I'm only planning on using 9-volt. I might do a quick cheeky little test with a very tiny LiPo that I bought, 2S one. But for the most part, I'm going to run this on 9-volt. I am going to have to print an extended battery tray because this one originally only held 3 batteries. That is not very much room to work with. So strife style, I have my red going in here, my red coming back out of here, and now I'm going to put this onto maybe an XT30 connector or a little tiny connector. I apologize if things got a little disjointed. I had some space issues with my camera, so hopefully I didn't miss too much for you guys. We have our wires going through our channels, coming in here to this switch. This assembly back together here now so that this rotates and the pusher goes in here. It's such a pain with these blasters that have the switches on the opposite side of all your stuff. Like, it's so much nicer to be able to do everything on one side. Get in your home. All right, I should really get out a heat gun and shrink that. I would really love to set up my little workbench here at some point that just everything is kind of in its place permanently. Feels like such a pain in the butt sometimes to get out different things. From my bag of connectors. Over time, it's cool that you just kind of like accumulate a lot of these parts and things. This just makes, I think this just makes the switch seem a bit more clicky. I think. Those wires aren't in the way, so I think we're okay. We're just gonna make this bigger. There we go. A hole big enough for a connector to go through. Do our negative first. The XT30 is marked with a negative symbol. If it's not marked, the pointier end is the negative always. Let's do a little test. I love that. I don't love that. Aren't we glad? Aren't we glad that we made a hole big enough that we could open this back up? Oh. Silly me. All that happened is my jam door was open. Try that again. The good news is that was pretty simple. I actually had a similar thing happen when I did the Ultra 1 mod. I thought there was something wrong, and it turns out I just, again, had removed the lock to the jam door and then forgot to check if it was closed. Let's try again. I wonder if whistlers will still go. Yeah, whistlers will still fire as well. So that might have been a really good crush level. For the crush on this, I think I went 42.5. Default is like 43.5. So I upped the crush a little bit. I'm gonna do a thing now that I have not done, which is to change the plug on a LIPO. I feel like this could almost be its own thing. One thing I will say, and I have learned the hard way, you need to make sure when you're cutting one of your wires that you do not let it touch the old one. I'm going to cover this entire thing so it is safe. You want to be very careful when doing anything around a LIPO. You do not want to expose the inside of that pack to the air. That. feel like I did a bad job. I love that. We're gonna see if we can make a little more battery room. We could use our Dremel, but where it's all closed up, I don't want to send that much dust into the blaster. All right, we cleared a little more battery tray room, so we'll find out if that helps us get this closed up. Before I print my extended battery door, I am gonna do one little test with this little 520C 2S LIPO that I got really cheap. I figured, why not try it? It's so close. There's no room in there for an alarm. That's not something that you should do. I'm just doing it for testing, and then I'm just curious, and then I'm gonna get an extended cover here, and I'm probably gonna run it off a 9-volt AA pack. So I kept on thinking about this, and we're going to make it so it has a 2-stage trigger. That actually seems like it might be pretty easy to do. We are using some stock switches. I stole a switch out of the jam door switch up here that we're not using anymore. We can use these old switches because we're just doing 9-volty type stuff. We're not doing high end. There are other ways you could do all of these things. I did print a rev trigger. There is a rev trigger kit for the Barricade from 01 Tech that looks really cool. I'm probably going to do his whole kit on my other Barricade, but for this gear up one, I really wanted it to look as stock as I could, and I did find on Nerf Singapore an old blog post that just recommended taking a switch, carving out a little groove here, which I've done. I just kind of took an X-Acto and a Dremel, and I cut a little notch, and we're going to wire in this switch. When we start to pull back our trigger, it's going to rev it up, and when we pull the rest of the way, it will fire. And since we've done, since we do have more voltage, as long as we're not doing a crazy fast trigger pull, we would need better motors and more power for that. But if we're doing it in a controlled fashion, this should actually work pretty well. I did think about using a different switch. Using a better switch would have required me to cut out this post to fit it in. And I don't know. I want this one to live in an imaginary world where the gear up blasters were just better, but not insanely so, just kind of in that 90s territory for FPS. You guys have seen enough of my soldering. All I'm doing here is I cut 2 more pieces of positive wire. I use the bottom 2 terminals on this switch here, and I'm inserting this switch into the circuit. This is after the battery switch up there. So on the positive wires way here, on the positive wires way to the motors, I cut it, and I am adding in these. So again, previously, this wire right here where we soldered and here, this was just connected. This is one circuit. I cut this wire in half. I added in these lines out to my other switch that's going to be part of my 2-stage trigger. So we're going to glue that in place and see how it goes. Doing it old school with a whole bunch of hot glue. That should keep that in place. And when this trigger gets pulled, it starts the switch. And the cool thing is the pusher doesn't engage until well after. So it's really easy to give this a partial pull to rev it up. I used gobs and gobs of hot glue. You could use some scrap pieces of plastic from the shell and kind of build that up more slowly. I could have even built like a little bit of a retainer for my big glue glob, But like I always say, I am still learning, and it didn't occur to me that I should have done that a little cleaner after, but I think this will work. And the nice thing about hot glue is it is reversible. You can, if I wanted to replace this switch, I can get that out of there, unlike if we were using epoxy or something like that. And I think that this is going to be plenty sturdy. I don't see this coming loose. I wanted to show this switch as well. It would take quite a bit of work and some bending of this lever. There might be a better option with like a roller switch or something like that. But this is a very heavy duty switch. We could use something like this instead of this little stock one. And if we were wiring to this switch, and I can talk more about this stuff later, we would wire this to the common one here and to this normally open one here. And that's what we would connect to if we wanted clicking that to close the circuit. Alternatively, this is a smaller cherry switch. These switches, I got them both from Out of Darts. This has a little nubbin as well. This is what I was saying. We'd have to remove this little post, but we could probably make something like this work as well. There are versions of this with a little lever arm, and that would be better than just this plain nubbin one. For wiring to this one, this terminal here is the common one. And this one, I believe, I have to check. Yeah, this is normally closed. So we press the button, and if we go to here and here, that completes the circuit. I'm pretty sure. You can check one of my other guides or people who are smarter than me, or ask in the comments if I made a mistake here, but I'm pretty sure that's how it is. I use these in my D-Dart build, so you can see it there too. Honestly, it wasn't that long ago I wrapped my head around the whole concept of how switches actually work. It's not that complicated. Basically, one terminal is common to both of the other two prongs. So for a strife style build, where you're doing a rev trigger, you would wire one wire to here to this common one, and then your other one here to the normally closed. So what that means is this is not a complete circuit until that's pressed, and then it is a complete circuit and power goes through. Alternatively, and the example I can think of is Dr. Flux did a build where he had a switch detecting if an air bladder was full for a build that he did. If you wire to this common one and the normally closed, power will flow through this switch, and then clicking that will break the circuit and make a motor stop. So there's lots of cool uses for that too. All that said, no matter which switch you use, the concept is the same. So fun. Oh, also, you'll notice I did cut away more. I made the top of this switch flush with this piece of plastic here. It just wasn't dependable enough if I just had the little nub sticking through. So the whole top now is flush with the trigger, and it works really well. I almost forgot, this is the other thing I was going to mention really quickly, this cool adapter from 01 Tech. I'll just give you the quick gist of how it works. You put a spring in here between these two knobs. You push in the rev trigger like this, and it pushes down that lever. And then the spring will kind of return it out. Lots of room in this barricade handle. I think for my tactical barricade, I may do this instead of a two-stage thing, because I don't really mind a rev trigger either, and I don't mind cutting the shell on a regular one. So really cool. Remember to check out all the 01 Tech stuff for the barricade. Yeah, it's very, very, very cool. One more note, if you do improve the switch for your rev, you may want to skip having a switch in here at all as a kill switch. It would be not impossible to get that in there, but I don't know if it would be worth it. You would have to Dremel out some space, make some room, because that's where the nub needs to be depressed right there. See right there. It would be doable. You could make this happen, and you could run wires down around under the trigger and maybe remove that screw post. We don't like to remove too many screw posts. You could probably just shave it down actually maybe, but you know, is it worth it? The other thing I thought that might make it worth it, because I like the idea of this one being original, is I did think instead of having this just be a kill switch, have this be a way to use the barricade as it was intended. So have this switch turn it on and have the motors run all the time and work independently of the two-stage trigger. So if I want to turn it on like an old school barricade, it just runs and I shoot and it works just like it used to. But if I don't have this on and I partially pull the trigger, it works as a two-stage trigger. I thought that might be a kind of cool way to pay homage to how the barricade originally worked. Once you get a little bit more comfortable with messing around with switches, you really see a lot of opportunities for what you can do kind of unfold in front of you, which is really, really cool. And if you think that sounds neat and you're wondering how, I don't know yet. I'm actually literally talking to Brel Cooper right now. I'm very much a novice when it comes to this stuff. I'm just happy to know what the labels of switches are. So You learn as I learn. I might do a little bit of a follow-up because I do like the idea of those options for the barricade for the on-off switch. And before we go, let's talk about a couple other ways to power this thing and things for battery. I do have this little tiny LIPO here, 2S. I'm not too worried about it because it actually doesn't seem to put out as much power as my 9-volt pack. So, and here you can see nothing happening here when I rev. So that is kind of cool. Now I will say, if we have this lock in, I have the lock out right now because we were talking about it, you can't actually pull the trigger if the blaster is not on. So what I like about this little one is I actually can fit it in my battery tray without cutting anything, but I can't get a voltage alarm or anything in there, so that's not really a good way to do it. The other way I can power this is with a 9-volt battery pack. Obviously this is pretty big. You would need to get a little bit creative on how to hold that on there, but that provides quite a bit of power. It's a darn shame that a 9-volt battery doesn't fit, because that would be kind of a nice fun way to safely fit something in here for a sleeper, but the 9-volt is just a little bit too high. While we're talking batteries, I need to quickly show you this really cool battery cage that's from 01 Tech. It's part of his Tactical Barricade. It is really neat. It is designed to actually fit in the existing battery holder without doing any cutting. It fits in just like that. You use the original screw hole right there, and now look at all of this room you have for, you know, for LIPO and alarm. If you've changed out the switches, like a ton of room. I can almost fit, and I kind of wonder if I ask 01 Tech super nicely, if this was like just a fraction taller, I could actually cram in my 9-volt pack. It's just a tiny bit too high, but this is just such a well-designed enclosure. The other really neat thing about it is that closes like that. We can kind of add a screw here, and then we have a little, you know, toolless way to open this up. It also has a hole up here for a voltmeter, which I'm going to do to my Tactical Barricade. I just think that is so neat. That's just a little bit of a note on different ways to power it. Works pretty well in a 9-volt battery. I don't know how long this would last for you to use, but anyway, it's definitely neat. I love playing around with all these power options and learning as much as I can. While I'm talking batteries, I should mention there are IMRs and Coolix and Trustfires and batteries that are AA shaped but have over 3 volts. A lot of times in stripes or blasters like that, people will use either 2 or 3 of those and a dummy battery, and that is definitely an option, and you can skip rewiring in general. I personally like either using standard AA or standard batteries that, you know, are pretty safe, or even, you know, kids are used to using, or LiPo batteries, because I'm pretty invested in that. I don't have a ton of experience with these. I really should get some, honestly, just to check them out and just to be a bit more knowledgeable. But as of now, I'm not. I would rather get in there and kind of rewire and change the plug and do some of that stuff. The magic of video. I just said I didn't know how to do it, and here we are, and it's done. I actually took a stab at the wiring diagram and went for it. I did check the diagram with my friend Markus and with Brell, and got enough of a thumbs up for me to try it out. So I was happy that my guess on how it could worked. I'm going to share the diagram. That'll be easier. I've tried to make it as easy to understand as I can, and I realize for those of you who really know what you're doing, probably not a big deal, but for me, I felt pretty handy. So I'm going to tell you guys what I did here. The blaster revs up if you use the trigger, and that original functionality is there where you can just turn it off and on. I think that's kind of cool. You can use it the way it was originally intended, or you can actually dual wield it. What did I do? Basically what's happened is we've made these 2 circuits. So if I push in on this trigger, this circuit is completed. Wire coming from the motors, coming up and connecting to here, coming out of this switch and going down into the battery. Or if I close this rev switch instead. Now it's closed from this coming from the motor, going over here into this switch, switch closed, and then coming back and going down into the battery. Maybe that's a little clearer. I think the diagram will be better. Thus concludes my barricade guide. You have 3 different ways you can do it just with the switch like the original, using this as an on-off or not at all. You have your 2-stage trigger and your original option. I feel like I'm probably not even done with this barricade. I might end up upgrading the motors at some point because I'm just having so much fun with it, which means I'd have to change out the switches. But you know what? It's such a fun little blaster. Disjointed mod continues. In order for this kind of dual function thing to actually work, I realized you need to remove this lock. Otherwise, you can't pull the trigger to activate the 2-stage trigger if it's not on. So I've unscrewed this. I'm going to remove this screw and I'm going to take out this trigger lock. Loosen that a little bit and this little spring, and that little piece came out. I'm just going to put this screw right back in there. That's the best way to know where it is. And I will close that back up. That should now work. All right, let's, this is getting to be a bit of a pain to close up. I'm just going to fast forward to the closed. And removing that lock has done it. So now you can do this. I promise this is the last clip. I ended up having to glue down some of my mess of wires because the trigger mechanism actually got kind of bound up in all the wires. You will have to secure things a little bit. I'm actually removing this jam door lock. There have been a couple of times now where I thought I was having a malfunction, but it was just the door wasn't completely shut. So I think I'm done with messing around with that. So I'm going to remove it. So what happens here is this little nub here, this little nub sticks up. What I'm going to do, instead of removing this whole piece, because I like the clickiness of this part in here for the jam door, I'm actually going to, I have to take this screw out too, or loosen it. Wow, nothing is easy. I'm going to actually, oh boy, back on there. I am going to have to probably take this out. I'll see if I can just pry underneath it. Anyway, I'm just going to take this nub right here and I'm going to Dremel across and I'm going to get rid of the little nub so that I still have the clickiness of this, but I don't have the trigger lock. It is the never-ending guide. I'm going to do this off camera. I don't want to get dust in this. And now the little raised bit is removed. I'm going to try to sneak this back in under this piece. Yeah, that's fine. Perfect. This goes back in here. Can you see? Yeah, that goes back in there. Just holds that little arm down. That's either not the right screw or I've stripped it. I think it's not the right screw. Try this one. Try to stop hitting the camera as well. Yeah, I think it was that one. And let's see if this actually does what I wanted it to do. Yeah, I think it will. That's going to slide freely over top of that now because that little nub is not there anymore to catch it. And I think that will be better. I really hope I don't have to remove these screws again. Yeah, there we go. So even if the door is open, we can still pull our trigger now, which I think is better. I'm going to close it back up and then I'll give it a little test. That's it. This is a long one. Thanks for sticking through. I hope you got lots out of it. I hope you mess around with a barricade if you find one. This is just now such a fun blaster. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you have any corrections, leave them in the comments and we'll work together and kind of figure out any mistakes I made. So I hope you have fun. I hope you enjoyed some of the details, and I hope you have a renewed interest in the Barricade. Bye-bye.